Now to the Pueblo Revolt of 1680. I've already mentioned the horrific conditions that Pueblo people encountered after the arrival of the Spanish. So of course there's going to be resistance to having your life totally changed against your will, to having to work for other people against your will. When you read the testimony by Pedro Naranjo that's in this week's readings, you're going to see that he says that planning to overthrow the Spanish was something that he had known about his entire life. And he was an old man at the time that he gave that testimony. So we know that people were thinking of how to overthrow Spanish oppressive rule from the very beginning. So over 8 decades of living under the system of the encomienda, of living with everything that you believed in taken away, pueblos began to organize to overthrow the Spanish. And they were successful. They killed people who represented the Spanish crown. They burned down buildings. They killed priests. And they talked about how would they get their lives back. How could they get rid of this colonization that they have lived under since the coming of Oñate in 1598? So the Pueblo Revolt has the consequence of pushing 2,000 people out of New Mexico. And the people that leave New Mexico include, I'm going to call them Spanish Mexicans so you don't think they're Spaniards, because they might not be. Spanish Mexican colonists, priests, and also native people who were forcibly brought with them. 2,000 people leave New Mexico. The pueblos regain control of their societies. They're able to use their spiritual practices. They're able to work for their own benefit and not for the benefit of other people. And so for 12 years, the pueblos control their ancestral lands again. Meanwhile, we have the 2,000 people who leave New Mexico. And guess where they go? They come right here to the El Paso del Norte region. At the time of the Pueblo Revolt in 1680, there was only one settlement in this area of El Paso del Norte, and that was El Paso del Norte, which was renamed Juarez in 1888 in order to honor President Benito Juarez. So the settlement was around the mission of Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe, de los Indios Mansos, which is right next to the cathedral in Juarez. But with the coming of 2,000 people, we see new settlements start to spring up. So if you look at this map, you can see familiar names. I'm going to look down at the map. So you can see, for example, Socorro, Isleta, Senecú, San Lorenzo. And you are also going to notice that all of those are on the other side of the river from where they are now. The river moves, or the river used to move all the time. So Isleta was founded as a mission for the Tigua people that came from Isleta Pueblo in New Mexico. Socorro was founded for the Piro people who came from what is now Socorro, New Mexico. And I just wanted to mention that the word Socorro in Spanish means to assist, to help. So when Oñate got to that pueblo in 1598, and as I said, asked for help, asked for food, asked for blankets, the people of that pueblo generously gave them food, and so he renamed it Socorro because it's the place that he had received assistance. When people are pushed out of New Mexico because of the Pueblo Revolt and native people are forcibly brought, the Piro people from that pueblo named their town Socorro. So you can see that there were several settlements created. If we think about what is called the Mission Trail in El Paso County today, those missions are the result of the 1680 Pueblo Revolt. San Elizario, which is part of the Mission Trail, is founded in the 1700s. It's actually a fort. It's not a mission, but it's included on that tourist trail. But the missions themselves actually are founded in the 1680s. So what was life like in the new settlements? The missions that were built, for example, here we have on this slide an image on the right of the Socorro mission, were truly the heart of the community. When I work with the city of Socorro and the people in Socorro or the people in the valley, they are very attached to the mission after these hundreds of years of that institution being central to their lives. If we think back historically to missions, missions were as much about religion as they were about economics. So it was the native people who physically built the missions. There was a lot of agriculture in the El Paso del Norte region back in those times. So for example, El Paso del Norte was known for its wine because there were so many vineyards. So it was a little bit different back then. They worked in the agricultural fields. They produced goods. So the missions are as much about spirituality as they are about producing wealth. Now the Tiguas have done a very amazing job at revitalizing their language, at making connections to the Isleta Pueblo in New Mexico. They have done an incredible job at keeping culture alive with their youth. Socorro seems to have lost a lot of that original culture. And recently I've been working with people in Socorro, and they are starting to work on uncovering those native roots with the Piro people who came. So you have these new settlements spring up, most of them on the south side of the river. Now half of them are on the north side of the river. It's a very agricultural place. The water table was higher back then, so it was easier to have agriculture here. Some people moved to El Paso del Norte, or to present-day Juarez. Some people moved to Chihuahua City. But you have this infusion of people come to this area after the Pueblo Revolt of 1680. The success of the Pueblo Revolt of 1680 lasted for 12 years. By 1692, the Spanish had militarily conquered New Mexico again, and they called it La Reconquista, or the Reconquest. Remember that I talked about that war between the Moors and the Spanish monarchs from 711 to 1492? Well, the Spanish monarchs always thought in terms of the reconquest. We're going to reconquer territory that the Moors have taken over. So again, it's a concept that is brought to the Americas from the Spanish experience with the Moors. So after the Pueblo Revolt, the Spanish were talking about how do we reconquer New Mexico, la reconquista of Nuevo Mexico. In 1692, they accomplished the reconquest militarily. They are back in control of New Mexico, but things are not totally the same. They're not totally the same. Remember the encomienda system that was so harsh and oppressive. Remember the attacks on Pueblo spirituality. Well, one of the things that the Spanish learned because of the Pueblo Revolt was that they couldn't just be that oppressive. They continued to be oppressive, but less so. So, for example, they did away with the encomienda system after the Reconquista. They ended up with a whole other system called repartimiento that is maybe a milder system of forcing people to work, but it wasn't the encomienda. They allowed some parts of Pueblo spiritual practice, just turning a blind eye to what was happening. So I wouldn't say that they believed in equality at all, but they did lessen the harshness of the system a bit.